Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Beneath the canopy of a fading sun, Camelot's grand towers gleamed like sentinels over the vast horizon. A lingering peace hung over the kingdom, but for those wise enough, it was a fragile veil, one destined to tear. Merlin, standing at the edge of the castle's stone balcony, felt the tremors of disturbance in the magical currents that threaded the land. The winds whispered Morgana's name, his hands tightened around his staff as his deep-set eyes clouded with concern. Inside the royal hall, King Arthur sat on the throne, his brow creased with thought. The mood of the court was cheerful, celebrating a minor victory over a neighboring rival. Yet, Arthur's heart was heavy with matters far removed from political gains. Merlin entered the chamber quietly, his presence commanding without a word. Arthur's eyes met Merlin's, and the unspoken weight between them drew the room to silence. Even Lancelot, seated nearby, sensed the gravity and straightened. "Merlin, what troubles you?" Arthur asked, his voice low but carrying the tone of a man who had faced countless dangers. Merlin stepped closer. "It's Morgana. She's found something. Something dangerous." The king's face darkened at the mention of his half-sister. Once, he had held out hope for her redemption, but now her name was synonymous with betrayal and ruin. "What has she done?" "She seeks the Forbidden Tower," Merlin replied. His voice, though steady, held a tremor of urgency. "An ancient vault of magic that holds the darkest curses of our time. If she reaches it and unlocks its secrets, Camelot's defenses, our magic, everything we've built, will fall." Arthur's knuckles turned white as he gripped the arms of his throne. He had fought many enemies, but none wounded him as deeply as Morgana. Her betrayal still lingered like an open wound. "Where is this tower?" Lancelot interjected, his warrior's instincts sparking at the prospect of a new threat. Merlin hesitated, the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. "It lies far beyond the borders of Camelot, deep within the Shadow Vale. The last of the old order sealed it, hoping its curses would never see the light again." Arthur stood abruptly, the decision made in an instant. "We ride tonight." The court stirred, whispers buzzing through the room, but Arthur's resolve was unshakable. He turned to Merlin. "What must we do?" Merlin lowered his head, his voice grave. "The tower is protected by traps and enchantments older than anything I've faced. We'll need more than steel and valor. We'll need wisdom, and perhaps, sacrifice." The king nodded, already gathering the resolve to face the battle ahead. "Gather what you need, Merlin." "We leave at dusk." Nightfall blanketed the land as Arthur, Merlin, Lancelot, and a small band of trusted knights rode through the shadowy woods. Their journey was swift, guided by Merlin's magic and Arthur's determination. Each step brought them closer to the ominous veil that hung over the Shadow Vale. The mood was tense, with the weight of the past threatening to overwhelm the present. Arthur rode at the front, his mind awash with conflicting thoughts. He had long been torn between the duty to protect his kingdom and the deep-seated hope that Morgana could be saved. But now, it seemed that hope was dimming, replaced by a cold certainty that their next encounter might be their last. Merlin, at his side, remained silent, his mind occupied by ancient memories and warnings left behind by those who had sealed the Forbidden Tower. His staff pulsed faintly with magical energy, the only light in the deepening gloom. "We're close," Merlin murmured, sensing the ancient magic resonating from the earth beneath them. The trees gave way to a narrow path that led deeper into the vale, and as they ventured further, the land grew cold, and the air itself seemed to thicken with a malevolent presence. The Forbidden Tower loomed ahead, an ancient and twisted structure of black stone, rising like a skeletal hand reaching toward the heavens. Morgana was already there. Arthur could feel her presence like a shadow on his soul. Her magic was woven into the air around the tower, stirring the ancient forces that had once been sealed within. She stood at the entrance, her long, dark cloak billowing like storm clouds, her raven black hair wild and untamed. Her eyes burned with both ambition and fury. "Morgana," Arthur called out, his voice echoing across the barren landscape. She turned slowly, her face a mask of defiance and pain. "Arthur, my dear brother, how noble of you to come. But you are too late." "Morgana, stop this madness. The power you seek will destroy everything, including you." Morgana's laughter was hollow, echoing against the stones of the tower. "And what do you know of power? You, who have always hidden behind Merlin's magic and the might of your knights." "I have seen the truth, Arthur. This world belongs to those who dare to take it." Arthur dismounted his horse and walked forward, his hand resting on the hilt of Excalibur. "You can still stop this. There's a place for you in Camelot, a chance for redemption." "Redemption?" Morgana sneered. "There is no redemption for me, brother. Only vengeance." Merlin stepped forward, his staff glowing with a protective light. "Morgana, the Forbidden Tower is not just a vault of power. It's a prison, built to contain forces beyond your control. If you unleash what's inside, you won't just destroy Camelot, you'll unleash chaos upon the world." Morgana's gaze flickered to Merlin, her lips curling in disdain. "You think I don't know that? The power inside this tower is mine by right, and I will wield it as I see fit." With a wave of her hand, the ground beneath them trembled, and the doors of the tower creaked open, revealing a swirling vortex of dark energy inside. The magic that lay within was ancient, its malevolence palpable. Even Merlin could feel its pull. "Morgana, you don't understand," Merlin began, but before he could finish, the air erupted with magical force as Morgana unleashed a blast of energy toward them. Arthur was ready. Excalibur's blade glowed with a brilliant light as he deflected the attack, but the force of it knocked him back. Merlin raised his staff, casting a protective barrier around them, but even he knew it would only hold for so long. "We need to get inside," Merlin said urgently, his eyes locked on the tower. "If she breaks the final seal, there will be no stopping the curses." Arthur nodded, his face set with grim determination. "Then we stop her now." Together, they charged toward the tower, but Morgana's magic was relentless. She summoned dark tendrils of energy that lashed out like serpents, striking at them with deadly precision. Arthur and Lancelot fought valiantly, their swords flashing as they cut through the magical onslaught, but it was clear Morgana had gained strength beyond anything they had faced before. Merlin, meanwhile, focused on the tower. He could feel the ancient seals weakening, and with them, the weight of the dark history buried within. The Forbidden Tower had been sealed for a reason, and now its secrets were stirring, eager to be unleashed once more. As they neared the entrance, a sudden blast of magic sent them all sprawling. Morgana stood over them, her eyes glowing with dark power. She raised her hands, preparing to strike the final blow. But then, in a moment of desperation, Arthur called out to her. "Morgana, wait. You don't have to do this." There's still time to turn back. For a moment, the air seemed to still, and something flickered in Morgana's eyes, a hesitation, perhaps, or a flicker of the woman she once was. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold, unyielding force of her ambition. "You're wrong, Arthur. There's no turning back." And with that, she unleashed the full force of her power, driving them back toward the tower's entrance. Arthur's body slammed into the cold, hard stones of the tower entrance, his head spinning from the impact. Excalibur slipped from his grip, clattering across the floor. His breath came in ragged gasps, the weight of Morgana's attack pressing on him like an invisible hand. He could feel the darkness creeping into the edges of his vision, but he forced himself to move, to stand. Camelot was at stake. Everything he had ever fought for depended on this moment. Merlin staggered to his feet beside him, his staff glowing with a dim, flickering light. The old wizard looked weary, as if the tower itself was draining the life from him. He shot Arthur a look of grim determination, and together they advanced toward the swirling vortex of energy that Morgana had unleashed. "Merlin!" Arthur shouted over the roar of the magic storm. "Can you stop her?" Merlin's face was pale, his jaw clenched. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice strained. "The power here, it's ancient, Far older than I am, but I'll try. They were close now. Morgana stood at the center of the maelstrom, her dark cloak billowing wildly in the wind of her own creation. Her eyes glowed with a malevolent light. Her hands raised high as she chanted in a language neither Arthur nor Merlin could understand. She was channeling the full force of the Forbidden Tower, the ancient curses that had been locked away for centuries. Arthur knew they had only moments to act. Merlin thrust his staff forward, the light flaring once more as he cast a spell of containment, trying to bind the dark magic before it could fully escape. The air around them seemed to shudder, the magic itself protesting Merlin's interference. Arthur could feel the pressure building, like the world was on the verge of shattering. Morgana screamed in fury, her concentration breaking as Merlin's spell took hold. She spun around, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You cannot stop me!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the ancient stones. "I will tear Camelot apart, and you will watch it burn." Arthur seized the moment. With a burst of strength, he grabbed Excalibur from the ground and charged at Morgana. The sword glowed with a blinding light, the magic within it resonating with Merlin's power. Morgana raised her hand to strike him down, but Excalibur's blade met her magic with a searing flash. The force of the impact threw them both back, but Arthur kept his footing, driving forward with every ounce of strength he had left. "Morgana, stop!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This isn't the way. We can end this now and together." Morgana's expression twisted, a mix of rage and pain. For a fleeting moment, her eyes softened, and Arthur thought he saw the sister he once knew, the one who had walked beside him in the days before all the betrayal. But then the moment passed, and the darkness in her heart reclaimed her. "There is no peace for me, Arthur," she whispered, her voice low and bitter. "Only power." She thrust her hands forward, and a wave of dark energy surged toward Arthur. He barely had time to raise Excalibur in defense. The sword's magic held, but the force of the blow sent him crashing to the ground once more. Merlin, still locked in his struggle to contain the tower's magic, glanced at Arthur, his eyes filled with an unspoken plea. They were running out of time. Arthur pushed himself to his feet, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. His vision blurred, and blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, but he didn't care. He couldn't care. Morgana was too far gone, and Merlin couldn't hold the tower's power alone. It was up to him to finish this. With a roar of defiance, Arthur charged at Morgana again. She unleashed another torrent of magic, but this time Arthur was ready. He twisted aside, dodging the blast, and swung Excalibur with all his might. The sword cleaved through the air, striking Morgana's staff and shattering it into pieces. Morgana screamed as the dark energy she had been controlling spiraled out of her grasp. The vortex at the heart of the tower surged, the ancient curses that had been sealed away for so long now threatening to consume them all. Arthur grabbed Morgana by the shoulders, shaking her. "You have to stop this!" he yelled. "You'll destroy everything." But Morgana's eyes were wide with terror, her control slipping away. "I can't." A broken bar, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "It's too late." A broken bar. Merlin, still battling to contain the tower's magic, looked toward them, his face ashen. "Arthur, the tower, it's collapsing. We need to leave, now." Arthur glanced at Merlin, then back at Morgana. Her face was pale, her body trembling as the dark power of the tower raged around her. Despite everything she had done, Arthur couldn't abandon her. "Not like this." "Merlin, can you save her?" Arthur called out, desperation creeping into his voice. Merlin hesitated, his eyes darting between the swirling vortex of dark energy and the shattered remnants of Morgana's staff. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice strained. "I can try, but it may cost us both." Arthur's heart pounded in his chest. Time was running out, and the weight of the decision hung heavy over him. Morgana had caused so much pain, so much destruction, but she was still his sister. And Arthur had always believed in second chances. "Do it," Arthur said, his voice resolute. "Save her." Merlin nodded, his expression grim. He raised his staff once more, the light flickering weakly. "Hold her still," he instructed Arthur. Arthur tightened his grip on Morgana's arms, holding her steady as Merlin began to chant in the ancient tongue. The tower trembled violently, the stones beneath their feet cracking and shifting as the dark magic threatened to consume them all. Merlin's spell wove through the air like threads of light, binding the fragments of Morgana's shattered staff and sealing the dark energy that had been unleashed. The vortex of magic above them began to slow, the chaotic winds dying down as Merlin's power took hold. But the cost was steep. As Merlin completed the spell, his body sagged, the light in his staff fading. He collapsed to the ground, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Arthur rushed to his side, leaving Morgana slumped against the tower's broken wall. "Merlin!" Arthur cried, his heart racing with fear. He knelt beside his old friend, checking for any sign of life. Merlin's eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. "It's done," Merlin whispered, his voice barely audible. "The magic is sealed. A broken bar. The tower. Broken bar won't hold for long. A broken bar." Arthur nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He hoisted Merlin up, supporting his weight as best he could. "We need to get out of here." Morgana, still reeling from the effects of Merlin's spell, looked up at Arthur, her expression one of dazed confusion. "Arthur, a broken bar? Why a broken bar?" she murmured, her voice weak. Arthur glanced down at her, his face hard but filled with sadness. "Because you're my sister, and despite everything, I still believe you can find redemption." Morgana's eyes filled with tears, but before she could respond, the tower shuddered again, this time with a finality that left no doubt. The ancient structure was coming apart at the seams. "Move!" Arthur shouted, pulling Merlin to his feet and dragging Morgana alongside him. Together, they fled the collapsing tower, the stones crumbling around them as the dark magic finally died away. The forbidden tower, the source of so much pain and destruction, fell into ruin behind them, its secrets buried once more beneath the earth. As they emerged into the open air, Arthur looked back at the wreckage, his heart heavy with the weight of all that had transpired. Camelot was safe, for now, but the cost had been high. Merlin leaned heavily against Arthur, his strength nearly gone, but he managed a faint smile. "We did it, Arthur." Arthur nodded, though his thoughts were far from celebratory. "Yes," he said quietly. "But at what price?" Morgana, silent beside them, stared at the ground, her expression unreadable. For the first time in years, Arthur saw a glimmer of the woman she had once been lost, but perhaps not beyond hope. Together, they began the long journey back to Camelot, the sun setting on the horizon, casting long shadows over the land. The tower was gone, but the scars of the battle would remain for a long time to come.